"We're selling the business. You're getting nothing." My father said it while everyone was still chewing Thanksgiving turkey, his voice as calm as if he were announcing the weather. My fork stopped halfway to my mouth. Across the table, my older brother lowered his eyes, but I caught the smallest smile at the corner of his lips. Then Dad slid a folder toward him and said, "You'll handle the transition." I stared at the folder, suddenly understanding why my father had asked me to come home after 7 years of barely speaking to me. He hadn't invited his daughter back for Thanksgiving. He had invited the person he needed to hurt before the sale was complete. For 28 years, our family business had been the center of our lives. Bellwether Hardware began as a tiny shop my grandfather opened with $200 and a borrowed truck. By the time I was 30, I had modernized its inventory system, built an online store, negotiated with suppliers, and turned our little neighborhood store into a regional company. My brother, Evan, was charming, confident, and good with customers, but he had never wanted the spreadsheets, late nights, or difficult decisions. Dad always said Evan had the gift for leadership. I had the gift for work. I never understood why one was considered more valuable. Before we begin, if you enjoy emotional and inspiring stories like this, make sure to support the channel by liking this video, subscribing, and sharing your thoughts in the comments. Your support helps us bring more powerful stories of kindness, hope, and humanity. I looked at Dad across the Thanksgiving table. He was 63, silver-haired, broad-shouldered, and still carried himself like the men who could lift a box of nails with one hand. "What exactly does getting nothing mean?" I asked. Mom's fork scraped against her plate. Evan finally looked at me. "It means the company is being sold," he said. "And Dad's keeping the ownership decisions within the family." I laughed because the alternative was crying. "Within the family? I've worked there since I was 17. Dad leaned back. "You left." "I left after you told me Evan was taking my position." "You made your choice." "No," I whispered. "You made it for me." The room became so quiet that I could hear the refrigerator humming in the kitchen. My youngest cousin stared at his potatoes. Mom looked like she wanted to speak, but Dad gave her a warning glance. Then Evan pushed the folder closer to himself. The buyer offered $18 million. $18 million. I stared at him. "And how much are you getting?" "That isn't your concern." That answer hurt more than the announcement. I stood slowly, grabbed my coat, and walked outside before anyone could see my eyes fill. Snow had started falling, thin and bright beneath the porch light. I had almost reached my car when Mom came after me. "Lena, wait." I turned. She was holding an old brass key. "I found this in your grandfather's desk," she said. "He told me to give it to you if your father ever tried to sell the business without telling you the truth." My fingers tightened around the key. "What truth?" Mom glanced toward the house. "I don't know," she whispered. "But your grandfather trusted you." The next morning, I drove to Bellwether before opening hours. The old store smelled exactly as it had when I was a child: cedar shelves, cardboard, machine oil, and coffee. I used the brass key on my grandfather's office door. The lock clicked. Inside, dust covered everything except one drawer. My hands shook as I opened it. There was a letter with my name on it. "Lena. If you are reading this, something has gone badly wrong. Your father believes the business belongs to him because I gave him responsibility. But responsibility is not ownership. 20 years ago, I placed 40% of Bellwether into a trust for you, because you were the only one of my grandchildren who understood what this company was supposed to be." Under the letter was a legal document. I read it twice. Then a third time. My grandfather had left me 40% of the company. Not Evan. Me. I sat down hard in the old leather chair. The door opened behind me. Dad stood there. For a moment neither of us spoke. Then he sighed. "I wondered when you'd find it." My anger came fast. "You knew." "Of course I knew. You were going to sell a company you don't fully own. I was going to buy out your share." "With what?" "The money from the sale." He looked away. That was when I understood. "The buyer knows." Dad nodded. Then why tell everyone I was getting nothing? His face tightened. Because I needed you angry enough to leave. Why? He finally looked at me. Because the buyer isn't really buying Bellwether. A cold feeling moved through my chest. What are you talking about? Dad closed the office door. The company has been struggling for 2 years. Supplier debt, lawsuits, bad contracts. I've been hiding it. I stared at him. How much debt? 11 million. My knees weakened. Then why would anyone offer 18 million? They aren't. He pulled another document from his coat. The $18 million figure was insurance money. A warehouse lease had been transferred months earlier. If Bellwether failed under specific circumstances, the company would receive a massive settlement. Dad had planned to declare insolvency, collect the insurance, pay selected creditors, and quietly transfer the profitable parts to a new company controlled by Evan. My stomach turned. You were going to destroy Granddad's business. Dad's voice broke. I was trying to save your brother. And me. He said nothing. That silence answered everything. The silence felt painfully familiar. I walked out of the office, but I didn't go home. Instead, I called the attorney whose name appeared on my grandfather's trust documents. Her name was Miriam Shaw. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, she said, Lena, your grandfather anticipated exactly this kind of conflict. Your 40% share gives you voting rights. Your father cannot complete the transaction without your approval. I closed my eyes. For the first time since Thanksgiving, I could breathe. But I didn't want revenge. I wanted the truth. That afternoon, I asked Dad and Evan to meet me at the store. Evan arrived furious. You're really going to block us? I'm going to stop you from committing fraud. His face changed. Dad sat down heavily. I placed the documents on the counter. You have 2 choices. We tell the buyer everything and negotiate honestly, or I take this to the authorities. Evan looked at Dad. You said she'd never find out. Dad's eyes filled with shame. That sentence broke something inside me. Not because they had betrayed me, but because they had apparently been planning to betray everyone. The next week was brutal. Lawyers came. Accountants came. Records were opened. Contracts were examined. The buyer withdrew the original offer. For a while, Bellwether seemed doomed. Then something unexpected happened. A local credit union agreed to restructure the debt if the company stayed under family ownership and returned to its original community mission. I offered a plan. We would close 2 failing locations, sell unused property, cut executive salaries, and turn Bellwether into a cooperative with employees receiving shares. Dad hated the idea. Evan hated it more. But the employees loved it. For the first time, everyone had something to lose and something worth protecting. Months passed. The business survived. Not as the empire Dad had imagined, but as something better. Evan left and started his own logistics company. We remained distant for a while, then slowly began speaking again. Dad stayed at Bellwether, but he no longer sat in the biggest office. He worked 3 mornings a week on the sales floor, where customers knew him by name. 1 year later, Thanksgiving came again. This time, the table was smaller. Dad placed a turkey in the center. Then he stood. Everyone looked at him. I owe my daughter an apology, he said. My throat tightened. He looked directly at me. I thought giving Evan everything would protect the family. Instead, I nearly destroyed it. Lena saved the business, but more importantly, she gave me a chance to become someone she could respect again. Nobody spoke. Then Dad reached into his pocket and placed something beside my plate. It was Granddad's brass key. I think it belongs here, he said. I picked it up. For years, I had believed that key represented a locked door I could never enter. Now I understood. It represented a door my grandfather had trusted me to open. I reached across the table and took my father's hand. His fingers trembled. Mine did too. Neither of us pretended the past had disappeared. Some wounds do not vanish simply because people apologize. But sometimes forgiveness begins with something much smaller, choosing not to continue the hurt. If this story touched your heart, tell me in the comments what you would have done if you were Lena. Would you have walked away, fought for the business, or tried to save the family too? And if you have ever experienced a moment when someone underestimated you, share your story. Your experience might give courage to someone quietly facing the same thing. If this story moved you, please like the video and subscribe for more inspiring stories about kindness, hope, courage, compassion, and humanity. That Thanksgiving, nobody announced a sale. Nobody passed around contracts. Instead, Dad carved the turkey while my mother laughed, the cousins argued over dessert, and the old brass key rested beside my plate. I finally understood that inheritance was never really about money, buildings, or ownership. Sometimes the greatest thing a family can inherit is the chance to choose differently than the generation before it. And that year, for the first time in a long time, we did. The hardest part came after the lawyers left. Saving Bellwether did not erase the memory of that Thanksgiving. I wondered whether he had ever believed I deserved anything at all. One evening, while I was checking invoices, Dad appeared carrying 2 cups of coffee. He placed one beside me and remained standing. "I know you don't owe me a conversation," he said. I kept looking at the screen. "I spent my whole life believing love meant making decisions for people," he continued. "My father did it to me. I promised myself I would never become him. Then I became worse." I finally looked up. "Why, Evan?" Dad swallowed. "Because he always seemed lost. You were strong. I thought you could survive my disappointment." I shook my head. "Being strong doesn't mean being hurt less." His eyes lowered. "I know that now." Then he pushed an envelope toward me. Inside was a photograph of Granddad standing outside the original store, holding my hand when I was 6. On the back, he had written, "Lena sees what people need, not just what they owe." Dad pointed to the sentence. That was the part one forgot. I touched the photograph carefully. "You can't fix everything with one apology." "I know. But you can start." He nodded. And he did. He called every employee into the conference room and told them the truth. He admitted the debt, the failed sale, and the plan he had hidden. Some quit. Others stayed. Nobody applauded him. Nobody forgave him instantly. But the company stopped living behind closed doors. That honesty became the foundation of the recovery. People later said Lena saved Bellwether. She always corrected them. "We didn't save a business," she would say. "We saved what the business was supposed to mean." Whenever a young employee asked why a brass key hung above her desk, she smiled and answered, "Sometimes the door you think was locked forever is waiting for you to become brave enough to open it."